Good morning, Liberty. It is Friday morning, the end of November, the 30th, 2018. My name is Michael Bolden, broadcasting live through YouTube from here at the 10th Amendment Center, which is my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on the West Coast. So good morning to you if you're out here with me, or later in the day, East Coast, Midwest, or wherever you happen to be watching, or if it's in the archive, whatever. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate you joining in. For those of you who aren't aware, we also do this show. So we do this show as a live stream on YouTube, but we also record it separately and post as a podcast through iTunes and Google. I'll probably expand that to a couple of other platforms in the near future, maybe after we get through the busy Christmas season, which is very busy for us at the 10th Amendment Center as well. We're doing fundraising and prepping for legislative tracking and outreach for the 2019 nullification season and the like. So before we get into today's topic, which is going to be about surveillance, and I know we've talked quite a bit about surveillance in the last couple of weeks. I did, I guess now 2 weeks ago, a show on automated license plate readers. We got some information through the Electronic Frontier Foundation about the number of license plate tracking scans and the billions of them that they're doing over a 2-year period, and the fact that 99.5% of those scans were of people who were never suspected of any criminal activity. We also did an episode talking about Stingray surveillance. That's the little cell site simulator, these handheld boxes or mobile boxes that can go wherever and spoof cell phone towers and spoof text messages and do all kinds of really bad stuff without a warrant, of course. And then on Wednesday's show this week, it was a different type of a surveillance, but it was through a question brought up from one of our viewers on YouTube during the live chat, asking about different types of facial recognition and surveillance cameras, wondering whether or not that they could detect concealed carry, a firearm under layers of clothes. I don't, at the time I really didn't think it could, or it just didn't dawn on me. I wasn't really sure, so I dug into it and started doing some research. So I did a whole episode of what I had found. I don't think I'm any level of expert. I'm just kind of learning on this. Of these various thermal imaging services, and some that are actually made specifically to detect concealed carry. One company called Patriot Tech specifically referred to every concealed weapon as a threat. So they're looking at as a threat, and they're providing this to law enforcement. We know they're using them already. In Florida, a big program, a trial program was being in use in the Bronx, somewhere in New York a while ago. So this is coming. And it's not good. And now today I also want to talk about surveillance through social media and federal pressure on these social media giants. But before getting to that, and we're not always just going to talk about surveillance here, although it is one, it covers so many different areas, so many of our rights. I mean, if you think about surveillance used to through social media monitoring can cause people to be fearful of posting dissent. I mean, it's not unusual for us to hear things like, oh, well, I'm not going to post that on my social media. I know they're watching. It does cause a chilling effect on the free speech of some people. The surveillance with the license plate cameras, we know, or they know, who's going to a gun show or a marijuana store. That's not good, because someone in power is going to use that in the wrong way. Stingrays, I mean, and on and on. And of course, finding out everybody who's concealed carrying is not a good thing. Someone had actually commented on that video when we posted it to our channel at BitChute. They had commented saying, basically, they don't care if the government is watching. Oh, because in an active shooter situation, it's going to create so much confusion. And I think they were talking about more in a logistical or a tactical sense. But absolutely, even in a non-tactical sense, government having this kind of power is dangerous. And the founders always warned us about the government having too much power. We talked about a while back, there was an article that Mike Meharry did about some of earlier writings from John Adams when he was really solid, probably before he became president. He was best earlier on in the pre-revolutionary days, too. He talked about nip the shoots of arbitrary power in the bud. Soon as they actually have arbitrary power is the time to stop it, not when they start using it in bad ways. George Washington, in his farewell address, talked about turning a blind eye to violations of the Constitution, even if you like the results. So let's say you are an anti-gun person and you want to stop people from having firearms. Like I would say the New York Civil Liberties Union in their statement that I read through on Wednesday's show about these virtual pat-downs, basically. They seem to be in favor of cutting back on guns in New York. But that's going to come back to bite you on some other issue. So you don't want arbitrary power. You don't want government to have more power, even if you like what it's using that power for right now, because eventually someone else is going to be in charge and they're going to use that power for something else, or they're going to expand on it. They're always going to look at the current power as a floor, not a ceiling. Like this, they're never going to say this is the max. They're going to say, well, this guy did it. Let's see how much further we can push it. And I should actually have pulled up a quote of the day. I haven't been doing that lately, but there's basically one, I think it was another one from John Adams, which is another really good one, referring to encroachments of power like a cancer. But I'll see if I can pull that up before the end of the show. So today I want to talk about surveillance of social media. And specifically in social media, the Facebook Messenger. And before getting to that, hello to a bunch of people in the live chat here on YouTube. Ward Lawrence, Joseph Standridge, Clay Davis, awesome. Existence saying crush that thumbs up button. Absolutely. So if you like the show and you enjoy what I'm doing here, you enjoy listening to what we're talking about, whether you're watching live here on YouTube or in the archive, or you're watching later on Brighteon or on BitChute or Twitter or wherever, hit the like button, vote up, smash that like button, leave some comments, share, retweet, whatever it may be, post the link on Reddit, whatever you do, whatever platform you're using, please share, spread the word, hit like buttons. It really helps trigger algorithms and tells these platforms to share it with more and more people. So really appreciate you doing that for those of you who have been doing that all along. It looks like the audio is a little bit low. I don't know what happened. I didn't make any changes, but for some reason my software is, I don't know. If there's any issues with the audio or video or anytime, whether it's just this show or anything else, leave me a comment, let me know here, or you can always shoot an email my way at team@10thamendmentcenter.com. So to today's show, let's just get right to it now. Talking about social media surveillance, it turns out that the federal government has been pressuring Facebook to recode Facebook Messenger behind the scenes, secretly. Let's check this out. There was an article yesterday from Gizmodo, which was reporting on another one from TechCrunch. Existence says, sounds great to me. Okay, good. Maybe YouTube is doing a good job with it. On my end, it looks like the levels are a little bit low, so I apologize for that if there's any issues. I'm bumping it up just a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look here. Gizmodo. ACLU wants release of secret court order demanding Facebook build surveillance backdoor. Interesting. Earlier this year, news broke, and I'm reading from the article at Gizmodo. Earlier this year, news broke that the Department of Justice attempted to force Facebook to secretly recode parts of its Messenger app to give them the capability to listen in on voice over internet protocol VoIP calls, even seeking a contempt of court order against the company when it refused to do so. Breaking that down, Facebook has a messenger app that a lot of people use. I use it pretty regularly with friends and family. I communicate with people there all the time. Chris Ann Hall and I communicate probably most often through Facebook Messenger rather than text or something else. So it's a very popular communications platform. It's easy to use. It's there. Sometimes it's a little annoyingly easy, but that's a side note. So the federal government went to Facebook and said, we want you to change your code without telling anybody, allowing us access to it. And Facebook actually said, no, we won't do this, or we can't do this. So that to me is more surprising. In some ways, it looks like Facebook, Google, YouTube, and all these other platforms are willing partners with federal surveillance programs They're willing partners with the monster state. Verizon, whatever it may be. AT&T definitely, because they run a lot of the NSA server centers. But I don't know. To me, it's up in the air. I don't know if there's just pressure on these companies and they just are like, hey, man, government's telling us to do it. And they really are like believers in government, or they trust government. And then maybe at some point it's just a push too far. Now we have to recode our entire app that we've put out there so you can have access to it without telling anybody. Man, that's a little too much, man. You know how much that's going to cost us? I don't know. I don't really know why they're saying no, if it's a principled thing or if they just don't want to spend the money or if maybe they don't have the capability based on how it's set up. So the ACLU put out a statement just this week saying, hey, we learned about this and there was this court order. Facebook rejected it, but the court order is sealed, so we don't know what's going on. And in the report here, it says the legal reasoning behind both the DOJ's attempt to secure a contempt of court order and its rejection have not been publicly released. Interestingly enough, and again, I'm reading from Gizmodo. Links are in the show notes if you're watching live on YouTube, or if you want to look through all our archives, they're over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. Gizmodo says this, quote, it's not totally clear whether Facebook uses true end-to-end encryption in the calls. Prior investigations from 2015 showed that Messenger session keys were shared in transit with the company using a standard protocol called SDES, making the keys potentially possible to intercept in transit. Let me break that down. I'm not an expert, but the general knowledge that I have says if you have real end-to-end encryption, then even if they don't actually have access to what the content of the message is. Facebook doesn't have it, so the federal government can't go to Facebook and say, give us the content of this message. No, there's an encryption key. Now, in 2015, they weren't using that process. They had a different version, so it could be intercepted. Now, Gizmodo suggests that it's possible that they added additional security layers in the last few years because of that report, or it has gone more secure, but no one knows. We really don't know how that's playing out, so we don't know how secure this is. And they point out that the victory here by Facebook, saying, no, we're not going to participate. We don't have access to this, or we can't do this, or we're unwilling, whatever it may be. They say it's important because authorities seeking this expansion of power, quote, chose a convenient villain. A street gang, MS-13, Donald Trump is denounced as animals, undeserving of the full spectrum protections of the law. That's how they reported it here. What they do tend to do when it comes to expanding government power, they always use fear. The Patriot Act. If there wasn't a Patriot Act, we were all supposedly going to get killed by terrorists. If there isn't an undeclared, unconstitutional war against Iraq, Saddam Hussein was going to use weapons of mass destruction and blow up the West Coast or whatever it may have been. So they expand power based on threats, on fear, on violence. And this time, they're basically saying, we need this. Now, I don't know if there was a public campaign on this. Maybe at some point, maybe this in and of itself from Gizmodo is the public campaign. For all we know, this is part and parcel of the propaganda. Like, oh, okay, Facebook is the bad guy. Everyone hates Facebook. I do. I use it, but I don't, I'm not a fan of them as a business partner. I don't like how they do things. I don't like their algorithms, and they're picking and choosing the more mainstream, So I'm not a fan of Facebook. I like Minds.com much better, but it's not grown fast enough yet for a lot of people to be there. I hope they do. So you pick an easy villain, MS-13, and another easy villain, Facebook, and there could be an argument to be made here like, oh, well, Facebook should give them access. The feds are only going to use this to get MS-13, this criminal, dangerous gang, these thugs. And then that's it. Just like we heard that the surveillance was only going to be against the terrorists. And then we learned that it's about everybody. Or that gun control like back in the 30s, federal gun control was only going to stop the machine guns of the Prohibition era. That was it. There was never going to be any more. But yet it gets worse and worse and worse because, again, every piece of federal power that they add is seen as a floor of power, a new step. And they never go backwards. They always build upon that. So Matthew Butts, awesome. Thomas Massey would love this episode. When I met him, told me he's paranoid about Messenger and refuses to download it. I used it. I resisted for quite a while. Hi to Idemon. Smash the like. I really appreciate that. Yeah, Messenger can be dangerous, and I think all of them can be, and I think that's the point here. Because even though Facebook refused to do this, they're not alone. There's WhatsApp, there's Skype, there's so many other services. And the point that the ACLU is making, and I actually pulled up their statement, and I'll get to that here in a moment, is that, you got to know what the court had to say. You had to know the circumstances so other businesses can maybe make a decision to take a stand. Maybe you can encourage them. Maybe there's something positive that came out of it. We just don't know. This is how ACLU put it. And I'm pulling this up. So again, if you're watching in the video, you can see this. I highlight a little bit with this Chrome app that I'm using. I wish they had the same extensions on Brave. Maybe someone. I like using Brave for my regular browsing. They have Tor built in. So if you want to go to private browsing with Tor instead of like an incognito tab, you can do that as well. I probably should do everything through Tor, but then of course I'll be on a target list. So Existence says, I deleted Messenger from my phone. Unless something recently changed, Messenger is not encrypted by default. Here's a list of the popular apps and their encryption on Recode. Oh, awesome. I'm going to add that to the show notes afterwards as well. The apps to use if you... Let me see if I can pull this up right here. That's a great link. I like Recode. So if you're watching, the apps to use if you want to keep your messages private. They talk about end-to-end, optional end-to-end, and real end-to-end. So iMessage, Signal, Private Messenger, WhatsApp. Dust I haven't heard of or Confide. The ones that are not, Kik, Skype, Snapchat, Twitter, Google Hangouts, Instagram. Optional is Messenger, Allo, Telegram, and Line. That's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to add that to the show notes in YouTube and then also at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. So let's go through again the Facebook statement here from, it looks like 2 days ago. Facebook reportedly refused, this was the court order, saying that in order to comply, it would need to rewrite the Messenger app's code and undermine its security infrastructure for all users. So this is how they basically are using what the founders would have referred to as general warrants. And general warrants were part of why they fought the War of Secession or the Revolutionary War against Great Britain, because they claimed that they could just issue a general warrant for everybody and everybody was under suspicion instead of having a warrant based on probable cause. So they wanted them to rewrite the app for everybody. The Justice Department, in response to that, even though Facebook said, look, hey, guys, we're going to have to rewrite this and remove security for everybody. And the Justice Department says, well, we're going to file for a contempt of court order. But it lost. And ACLU notes that all of these proceedings remain under seal, so no one knows exactly what happened. And this is where it gets into the concern about other pieces of software, other businesses. ACLU says this, some 1.3 billion people around the world use Facebook Messenger, but even more use other communication services such as WhatsApp, Skype, and Microsoft Outlook. Facebook may have won this time, but if the government tries to force another service to undermine its security features and that service wants to fight back, it won't be able to rely on the court's reasoning so long as the opinion remains under wraps. I don't like relying on courts at all. But when something happens but that's positive and you hide it, then no one can make the same argument. And of course, the government likes it that way. And that way it makes it more difficult for other businesses to do the same or other individuals. So what's the solution here? And I think just like in the live chat from Existence, it's to look to the communications apps, and I am very guilty of this. of not doing this. Look to the communications apps that are more secure. The more that people use encryption, the more that they use more secure devices, more secure apps, the more difficult it is to do all the surveillance. So even if they could, so even with end-to-end encryption, they could target that. Like if you're, like if there's a small number of people that are targeted, they can break that. But if everybody's doing it, it's hard to do mass surveillance of everybody. So it is important for us, and I am not doing this, so I really should. Maybe this will be the show. Idemon says Signal is the one to use. EHP Training uses Signal. I've also heard of Redphone was another one. I'm not sure. Maybe one of you guys know about that. But I really should get on one of these. One of my friends, Jared LaBelle from the Libertarian Institute, he also works with Scott Horton over at antiwar.com. He was texting me the other day. He's like, man, I cannot believe you don't use Signal. He's like giving me crap about this. And I think everybody should. So I'm embarrassed now publicly because I talk about surveillance and privacy all the time. And I am not actually following my own advice. So I'm going to start doing that maybe not procrastinating. I'm going to do it today. I'm going to set up Signal on my phone. Absolutely. And I'm going to show you guys on Monday. If someone reminds me, I'll show it. So Existence says another route the NSA picks up our conversations is through your keyboard app. The only way I've found around it is rooting your phone and firewalling off an app. Another article. Oh, man. I really appreciate you sharing this kind of information. Clay Davis says, Mike Meharry turned me on to Signal. You know, Meharry never talks to me about, like, man, we should start using encrypted communications. I think in the past, we had talked about it years ago, we actually used to do 10th Amendment Center team communications through a Facebook group. And I was so glad we moved over to another private business called Podio for our tasks and internal communications. That's much better. Idemon says the WhatsApp founders created Signals and invested $50 million into it. Okay, cool. Gold standard with Alan Mosley. He won't do it. Mike Meharry is a Fed plant. Okay, so the point here is that if you can't figure out why Facebook won this round, or even why Facebook is doing this. It seems like it's that they don't want to recode it. Maybe that's the excuse. Maybe they say they can't. Who knows? Unless you can get that information, these other businesses are going to have a hard time defending against Department of Justice pressure. Whether it's an active shooter situation or MS-13 or got to get the terrorists or whatever it may be, they're going to continue pressuring and pressuring. And the fact that they actually tried to get Facebook to do this behind the scenes secretly without telling anybody shows how bad they really are. So what do we need going forward? A friend of mine, Hunter Hastings, who's a great supporter of the 10th Amendment Center, a longtime supporter of the Mises Institute as well, started an organization called the Center for Individualism. It's really interesting reading. There's a lot of really good stuff based on entrepreneurship, day-to-day business choices, and living more freely. It's libertarian focused. I believe Hunter would refer to himself as an ANCAP. And one of the posts over at centerforindividualism.org recently ties into this, and it's by Brittany Hunter, who's long written for FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, but she's now writing for CFI as well. And if you want to just, they do a post every couple of days. It's a good one to add to your RSS feed if you're using a feed reader. And this one from Brittany says, how an unhackable email service protects individuals against the state. And I think that's the point. Whether you're using email or a messenger like Signal, the more people that do this, the harder it is for government or hackers. And I know, like, a lot of times the people on the left who are just anti-corporate but pro-government are more concerned about corporate surveillance. Oh, Walmart's going to spy on us and then give us all these ads and trick us into buying things, or Amazon's going to do that. I mean, if Amazon can figure out something that I can buy on sale, although I don't want to use Amazon as much because they're a government contractor at this point, providing facial recognition surveillance technology to police departments in Florida. They're also bidding aggressively to be the AI provider for drone warfare for the Pentagon. And I had mentioned this on my Twitter account recently that I don't want to do business with Amazon as much because of this. They're really getting aggressively involved in government. And someone said to me, you know, hey, as a capitalist, I can understand a business is going to just aggressively go for the biggest contracts. And where else can Amazon go? And yes and no, because when I dug into it, I actually found that Google was in the running for this, and they withdrew voluntarily. And they actually issued a statement that says providing AI drone bombing technology to the Pentagon. And Google's not really even one of the good guys. And Google said, this does not align with our core values. We're backing out and turning down the opportunity. But Amazon is going even more aggressively on this. So this article from Brittany Hunter over at centerforindividualism.org is talking about a really important email service called LavaBit. And this was run by a guy named Ladar Levinson. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And he had actually been running this service, basically encrypted email service, hard to hack, hard to spy on email service. And it turned out that Edward Snowden was using it. And so when the Snowden leaks came out, the feds came behind the scene to Levinson and said, hey, buddy, we need to get access to Edward Snowden's communications. And Levinson said, well, I can't do that because the way the system is set up, there is no way for me. I don't have access to it. It's encrypted. I can't even see it. The only way to do that is to give you the keys to the car, and that means you have access to everyone's. And because they were using something under the Patriot Act called National Security Letters, these NSLs, whenever you're issued a national security letter, if you reveal that you're under pressure to do something, you're going to jail for a felony. So he couldn't even tell his users that this is what was happening. So instead of actually turning it over, he shut down his business. This is a very principled individual. He closed his business and he destroyed his servers. I don't know, and I really should look into this at some point. I don't know how he got away with this without getting charged with destruction of evidence or something, but for some reason he did not. He basically just said, rather than comply with the national security letter, rather than provide you the keys to my service so you can access everyone's communication who uses LavaBit, I'm closing it down. And that to me is a heroic individual who decides to say no to partnering with the government when the government wants to violate everyone's rights, and instead moves on. Now, years later, and you can read through this. I don't want to just kind of bore you through all this stuff, but basically I've given you the gist of the story here. Levinson started this service. Snowden was using it. The feds came to him with an NSL, National Security letter. He decided not to comply. He shut down his business, destroyed his servers, couldn't give him access, so no one has access to anything. And then Brittany notes that he's actually started a new version of it with another version of encryption called asymmetric encryption. Robert Sanderson posts a really good link. How to alert your users with revealing an NSL from EFF. That's interesting stuff. So basically, he started this new unhackable email service, and there's a video at the bottom. So look at the show notes. Check this out. It's a different type, a more advanced type of encryption, and it looks like he's got LavaBit up and running again. I looked at it, and again, this is something I should probably implement for 10th Amendment Center. I hope if anyone has tried it yet, they can let me know, give me a review of whether or not they think it's a good thing. I also want to say hi to Luke Porras. Good morning. First time you caught the show live. You should be able to replay it while we're going. I know it has a DVR function that we have set up through YouTube. So YouTube has that feature you can back up. If not, generally the archive posts, I think within 30 to 45 minutes after we're done doing the live stream, which will be done here in a minute or so. A lot of really, really good feedback. I appreciate all the links here that everyone's sharing. I hope you are finding this as interesting as I am. I want to see if I can quick pull up this quote of the day that I found. It's one of our tweets. If you're watching, you're seeing me click through a bunch of junk. Here we go. This is the one. A guy named John Williams. He was a leading anti-federalist in New York State. New York was a hotbed of opposition to ratifying the Constitution. It wasn't even likely that they were going to ratify even after all the requisite number of states had ratified. And in a debate with Alexander Hamilton, John Williams was basically saying, hey, no matter how you tell me these clauses are constructed, this, quote, ingenious men may assign ingenious reasons for opposite constructions of the same clause. That was a warning. And that, of course, is what we see playing out today when they say that you can't violate the Fourth Amendment. They just claim, well, these aren't violations of the Fourth Amendment, or there's an exception for national security or government need to the Fourth Amendment, and therefore it's okay. And that's basically what Brett Kavanaugh had to say about mass surveillance when he was on a lower level court than he is today. He basically said, in his opinion, in 2015, that he didn't believe that these surveillance programs violated the Fourth Amendment, but if they did, he would still authorize it because it fits a special needs exception. I don't see anything that says special needs exception in the Fourth Amendment or the Second Amendment or any of them. And to me, this is an example of ingenious men assigning ingenious reasons for opposite constructions of the Fourth Amendment. We see it happen on the Second Amendment, the 10th, every single clause of the Constitution. Thank you to John Williams for that warning. A lot of people don't know who that guy is, but he had a lot of great statements, especially in that New York ratifying convention. Again, I hope you had you have a really good weekend coming up. It's actually my birthday tomorrow. I don't want to kind of belabor that, but I'm going to spend some time with family and friends. It should be a nice time off over the next day or so. I hope you have some nice plans for the weekend. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today, and I'll see you again next week, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. I hope you have a great Friday. Thanks again for watching.